I'm Shiri Godasi. I am a psychedelic integration therapist and a pioneer in the harm reduction space for about a decade now. I'm also Nectar's director of integration. It seems to me like a lot of people, especially as integration becomes more trendy, prominent in the space, people are becoming more aware of the need to integrate psychedelic experiences and how it is such a vital part of harm reduction. It seems like not too many people are actually talking about how to interpret the journeys. So I'm very excited to share this information with you here today. Everything that I'm about to share, by the way, is a disclaimer, is for informational purposes only. You all know that we are still living at the age of prohibition. And unfortunately, even though it seems like things are moving forward rapidly, which they are, the compounds that we will be discussing today in many parts of the world are still illegal for use. So if you do decide to partake with illicit substances or hopefully not partake in illegal activities, of course, you're going to just decide to do this on your own in a very safe way and a mindful way when you approach psychedelic substances. Everything that is shared here, again, it's a part of an integration philosophy, and specifically my integration philosophy. Okay, this is not rooted in science. There is no backup research. All this information, everything that I've gathered and compiled is literally, it's been compiled from field work, from supporting people in integration processes for, again, almost a decade now. And just being in that space with them, of course, being a psychonaut myself and being in deep study with psychedelic integration. It's a theory that's offered in love, but of course, it's a subjective theory that, again, I've innovated. So I just invite you to understand it in this way. In this presentation, we're going to discuss approaches, techniques, and interventions to support a psychedelic integration process. Broadly applicable to trips where, quote unquote, nothing happened, trauma-related insights, weird and shocking experiences, bad, quote unquote, bad and or difficult trips, cryptic and unclear insights, and of course, some integration tips because we have to, because this is, again, all a part of the theory that we call psychedelic integration. Everything that I'm going to share is going to be applicable for all medicines, all doses, and all types of experiences, including synthetic compounds and substances like LSD, MDMA, synthetic 5-MeO-DMT, ibogaine, and of course, natural compounds, plant medicines like ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, cannabis, etc. It's going to be relevant for both microdosing and heroic doses, for planned diets, and also for all types of use, whether it's recreational use, ritual use, trauma healing, or psychospiritual purposes. Of course, you can book a time to work with me one-on-one or in a long-term private coaching container. You can also join our 2-week prep program, Nectar's ceremonial preparation course. And if you want to learn more about my work, it's at psychedsoul.com. Well, I'm going to officially start our program today with a question, or maybe a provocative question, if you will. So we are here to learn about interpretation of psychedelic journeys. But my question for you is, do we need to interpret psychedelic experiences? What is the goal of doing so? What do you think that engaging with interpreting of psychedelic experiences provides to us? How does it exactly benefit us? And, I have my opinion on this. I'm going to share it at the end, but this is just something to get your juices flowing. All right. When we attempt to interpret psychedelic journeys, we can see it as, again, an attempt. It's an attempt to explain, to describe, to comprehend, or to analyze an experience. Basically, we're attempting to ascribe a meaning or a point to the experience, because when there is a meaning and a point, then culturally speaking, then it's not useless. Basically, it goes from not having function to having some type of a function. It becomes valid because when we can explain something, then we can validate it. But we live in a society where, again, it seems like there's got to be a point to everything. There's got to be an outcome. There's got to be a product. And psychedelics can be used for healing. They can be used for growth, for creativity purposes. It seems like there's always got to be some type of a purpose. When you hear the term recreational use, what comes up for you? Culturally speaking, when we say the words recreational use of psychedelics, typically it's frowned upon. Like it's a less than or a less worthy cause to use psychedelics. And I just want to name that because culturally we're become nearly obsessed um, with this topic. Again, needing to interpret or understand psychedelic experiences, both as psychonauts and as a community. But all of us, the community at large, and of course, us as individuals, we are all products of a society and a culture that at the end of the day is somewhat limited and biased. And just to give you an example of a limiting cultural construct, let's take a look at language, right? What is language? When we try to use language, right? When we try to actively place the limitations of language constructs, which again, language is a construct that is invented by humans for communication, but it's limited. It's limited. We don't have all the words to explain everything that exists. So when we try to actively place the limitations of language on the ineffable or an ineffable experience, such as psychedelic experiences, then how do you think that may affect our experience? There is so much useful knowledge that can be gained from psychedelic trips, and I am going to speak to specific techniques and insights, but I also want to preface all of this with an invitation to not get locked into this perspective of, again, of needing to interpret. Let's approach this modality with more flexibility. Let's allow it to just expand our awareness and to remain curious with it all. Those of you that know me know that one of the quotes that I'm probably most identified with is that the most predictable thing about psychedelics and entheogens is that they are completely unpredictable. And of course, all the psychedelic themes that, or rather insights or visions that can be revealed to us in psychedelic experiences, they can be either obvious and detailed or symbolic and cryptic. Basically, the psyche is a vast playground, right? And no medicine and no dose or journey will ever be the same. And therefore, the variants of psychedelic journeys, as well as insights and visions, are infinite. And because of the vastness of the psychic territory, right, it can be helpful to lean on anchoring points that can support us when we attempt to chart this uncharted territory. So when I say anchoring points, I mean baseline foundations before we get into techniques and interventions, baseline foundations that we can rely on when we attempt to interpret psychedelic trips. So there are 3 of them. So the first anchor point that I want to propose to you is to always remain curious and humble, right? Know that you don't know as a baseline standard. We always have to consider what we call the great mystery as a variable in this equation of attempting to interpret psychedelic experiences. Basically, accept that just as much as we can, again, attempt to interpret, attempt to make meaning, and attempt to know, the truth is that we don't know much at all. And when we accept this limitation, paradoxically, it provides us with more freedom. Basically, when I own that I don't know much and I'm never going to know it all, no matter how much I try, it automatically creates an expansive mindset, and it allows us to remain open to possibility. It allows us to remain open to receive new understandings. Again, because we're not limiting ourselves. So it encourages new pathways to creative solutions and understandings. The second foundation is going to be that your default trip analysis vantage point. And here's what I mean by that. You want to figure out or at least become aware of your default vantage point from which you reflect on and analyze your trip. Basically, what is your point of view when you examine your trip? What exactly are you looking at, and from where are you looking at it? Meaning, am I looking only at the insights themselves? And or am I looking at the story that the insights tell when put together? And or am I looking at and I'm aware of the emerging patterns and themes that when I closely examine all the different nonlinear pieces of a journey, I can see emerging patterns and themes. It's more of a systemic approach, right? And or am I interpreting it only from like my own experience as I saw it? Or am I also including in my formula my experience within a group? Or perhaps I can look at it from the vantage point of that of the groups. Is the shaman somewhere in there? Is there going to be an articulation of content versus context? Now, this is what my integration philosophy is all about. We can look at the insights themselves, the visions that we always look for, that clear vision, that snake, that anger, right? The sadness. That's one way to look at it. And we can also look at the ecosystem that is in which the insight or vision exists in. Meaning, what are the pieces around this particular insight that made it so? So I'm talking about like a zoom out perspective, a meta perspective, always zooming out from the insight itself or the vision itself to look at the bigger picture of things, which automatically will provide me with more information. So am I looking at, again, the microcosm or the macro, right? Or rather, how can we examine both terrains and basically make both of these point of views work for us? So it's like a multidimensional awareness of an experience, which of course includes the insight, if it was there. But I'm saying if, because what about those trips where I didn't see anything or nothing happened? Is it true that still nothing happened? Or is it just that there was an attachment to see some type of a snake, right? Or a light or colors or a hallucination, like pop media tells us that we need to see, otherwise our trips don't work? Or was there something else in that experience, in that trip, that is absolutely relevant for the intention of why I went in there and is absolutely relevant for my healing at this point in time in my life? So as you see from this, again, second foundation, basically my POV, my default vantage point is always to see that insight as one tiny fragment of a much larger story. And then foundation number 3 is going to be to seek the relationship. And this, again, correlates with context versus content. All right. So again, when we remove when we shift the focus from what is obvious, again, insight, vision, we may find that in these liminal spaces, all right, we're actually going to find what may be the most important aspect of the psychedelic trip, the relationship to it, right? So basically what I'm suggesting is it's not about the thing itself, right? Not about the vision itself, the thing, the insight, the vision, the medicine, the spirit, the ceremony. It's not about the ayahuasca. Ayahuasca told me so. Not even necessarily about the community. So it's less about the thing and more about the relationship to the thing. And specifically, our relationship to the thing. And what I mean by that is, again, if we take that, the snake analogy, like a snake is such a prominent vision in psychedelic trips. So how is it that for some people, when they encounter a snake in their ayahuasca journeys, they become absolutely terrified and frozen and begin airing into the air of having a bad trip, versus other people that may see the exact same snake, even sitting in the exact same ceremony, and they decide to just ride that snake and they get taken into a completely other reality and they're shown all the possibility that is available to them. How is that so? Same vision, same experience, same medicine. The difference is the relationship that each of us has with the thing. So again, when I look at the relationship, i.e. the context, this is going to reveal, it's going to act like a mirror that's reflecting to us our traits, our behaviors, our needs and desires, our personality blocks, our archetypes, our memories, our attachments. So for me, when interpreting psychedelic experiences before taking things at face value, again, I'm going to shift my focus to the relationship and again, that part of the ecosystem. So just to summarize, the 3 foundations are: number 1, to remain curious and humble. Know that you don't know as a baseline. Number 2, to mind your default trip analysis vantage point. And number 3 is to seek the relationship. One really useful way of beginning to decipher psychedelic trips is to identify themes. So themes are helpful both on, again, the micro and the macro levels. Micro levels of the experience and the macro, meaning the zoom in and the zoom out, the granular and the ecosystem. So for example, I can look at the topic of themes, of finding themes from a single journey, a single ceremony. I can find the theme of a single ceremony, and I can also potentially articulate multiple themes in a single ceremony, right? So there can be one overarching theme, 2, 3, maybe even more. I can also maybe identify a theme of when I work with one particular medicine, right? So if you're a psychenaut that sits with multiple or have sat with multiple medicines, and even shamans, facilitators, traditions, and lineages, then you may discover that when you sit with ayahuasca, the theme typically seems to be early childhood. Or when you sit with this particular shaman or facilitator, the theme always seems to be more light and celebratory versus when I sit with another facilitator, for instance, right? So again, theme of working with a particular medicine or a particular container. Another way to find themes is across a timeline, right? So even if I sit with multiple medicines, and let's say I've been sitting for about 6 months or a year, in hindsight, what have been the themes for me in the last 6 months? What's been the emergent theme from all these multiple ceremonies I've been sitting with? And another way to find a theme is finding a theme through your season of integration. I've been deep in my integration study for 10 years, and I can definitely attest that depending on the season of my life, and of course, depending on the medicines I use as well, but depending on where I am in my life, different themes are going to start emerging. For example, when I was in the beginning of my journey, it had a lot to do with deep family healing. And then a few years later, I was just at a different place and it all began centering around creativity. So those are some ways to find and discover themes from ceremonial work. And then, of course, there are many other ways to discover themes as well as meaningful insights of your journey, right? Just by virtue of observation. What I'm going through right now, again, it can pertain to, as mentioned, bigger ceremonies, or even just, again, themes across multiple trips, or even just like one single isolated journey. Okay. There's really no rules here. But how can we discover, again, themes and making meaning with your insights, right? So when you sit in journeys, sometimes you may find that some certain memories come up. And these memories can seem sometimes completely like non sequitur, not having anything to do with your intentions, seems completely random and isolated, like you can be sitting and just having a very deep, I don't know, mushroom experience. And supposedly nothing is happening. Absolutely nothing is happening, which, by the way, the nothing happened is actually very common for people who are first time trippers. And especially it seems to be true with ayahuasca. All right. So psilocybin or ayahuasca, nothing is happening. And then you go back to, again, your integration coach, your therapist, your community, and they ask you, well, what happened? Tell me about your trip. And they say, nothing happened. But I do remember that at a certain point, I had it flashed before my eyes that I was, sitting in my third grade class, and my friend was looking at me, and she said something that made me feel unsettled, right? Just something completely random. Even if absolutely nothing happened for the rest of the ceremony, from that particular memory, again, even if it seems non sequitur, even if it seems like your childhood was absolutely perfect, there were no traumas that you can recall, there were no incidents that you could recall, I can pretty much guarantee that sitting with a person that, again, if you sit with this particular memory and you begin to collect, again, more information around what happened in the ceremony, in the group context or in the environment or in the way that you were carrying yourself, there is something very deep in there, because it's not by chance that you just remembered that. It came up for a reason. So basically what I'm saying is I wouldn't discard any type of thing as random as it seems. But again, not to say that absolutely everything has to be analyzed to death. I'm just saying that things that can seem irrelevant can actually hold a lot of meaning when you learn, again, to unpack them and look at them in a systemic way. Raise your hand if psychedelic medicines have changed your life. Raise both hands if you are a cisgender female that wants to serve in the psychedelic renaissance as an integration coach, a healer, or a psychedelic therapist, but has no idea where and how to begin. Soul Sister, welcome home to the Psyched Souls Integration Coaching Certification Program for Visionary Women, our best-selling 6-month professional training and personal development program where you get to dive deep into your own integration practice way beyond meditation and journaling while getting certified as a high-caliber psychedelic integration coach and guide. In our iconic program, you do your work through an experiential, creativity-centered, and system-rebelling transformational vortex that is grounded in proven methods and expert-level technologies, preparing you to take root as a psychedelic leader in your community. You have full intention to participate in this revival, and we provide you with the know-how, with the tools, and with a full-body confidence to create it. So if you are a psychedelic-informed woman with a huge heart of service that is ready to get off the fence and unapologetically step out into the world offering psychedelic support, stop playing small sister, take a leap into your soul-aligned, paradigm-shifting service career in the psychedelic revival and help spread more light consciousness in the world. Learn more and apply at psychedsoul.com/training. Traumas. I really want to talk about this because this seems to be one of the most relevant insight for most people. And I say, well, not even most people, but all of us. I'm going to say all of us. And here's why. Even if, again, you're a person that considers themselves to, again, have never undergone a traumatic event, you're one of those very privileged people that overall, again, remembers having a happy life. Everything has been well. You don't consider yourself a traumatized person. The truth is that we are all products of trauma. We all carry trauma to an extent. Why? Because we are all products of a traumatized society. All the systems in which we operate in as humans are the byproducts of trauma and or have been created by people who carry trauma. And if it's not you, then it's someone in your community, it's someone in your society, it's someone in the world, Let's say that you're sitting in the United States and the conflict in the Middle East supposedly has nothing to do with you. To an extent it doesn't, and to an extent it does, because the governments are involved, and maybe it's affecting your neighbor, and to some degree, right? Or maybe you watch the story on the news and it has left an impression on you. So basically, trauma is always there. And again, if it's not for you, it's for your parents. If it's not for the parents, it's in your family's lineage. Someone 1 degree from you / you has experienced trauma. So what I'm saying is trauma should always be in the field of awareness when we interpret psychedelic journeys, and even when we prepare to go for a journey. It's something that should be discussed as an option, that it may or may not come up in a certain way. Again, it's either experienced directly or acutely. Sometimes it's chronic. A lot of us, again, that feel like we had a happy childhood, we only discover through medicines that, again, supposedly everything was fine, but it's enough that a couple of some things happened with our parents when they couldn't have our needs met in the way that we needed, and it completely changed our attachment from secure to insecure, and therefore it's a type of early childhood development trauma. Of course, there's complex trauma, there's all sorts of trauma. So because trauma is on the table, sometimes people would understand that, there was a traumatic event by a very clear revelation, right? For example, a lot of people that, again, didn't think that they were affected by trauma in their life, they went in to have a divine uniting experience with the God molecule 5-MeO-DMT. They ended up understanding or being revealed that when they were 3 years old, they were sexually molested by their grandfather. Excuse me, trigger warning here. These things happen, and they happen often. And then sometimes the experience is feeling like crying and then feeling all the pain and sadness for all the people in the world that have never cried in their life and they can't heal. That's an experience of trauma healing as well. So there are ways to differentiate, again, between individual trauma, direct, chronic, acute, complex, collective. Okay. And this is definitely something that I encourage to unpack with someone who is experienced and knowledgeable in trauma informed. All right. So trauma is a big one. And then other ways to find meaning in your trip are to notice, sometimes it's the insights are very clear. Sometimes it just seems kind of like undulating colors and shapes and maybe sacred geometry. So like one way to look at it would understand like how we're connected, understanding like the sacred geometry is the building blocks of the universe. Some people literally see themselves inserted into these building blocks. If you're just seeing colors, don't discount the colors. Because sometimes when you take these colors together, and I'm going to give an example, right? I remember like having a client where she vividly remembered in her journey seeing the colors red, yellow, and orange. And, she couldn't understand why. And then when we sat with these colors and did a little work around them, and she began remembering other things from the journey, and she realized that these are the colors of fire. And basically she saw the energy of fire was very prominent for her. And that has to do specifically with some anger that she was feeling towards her family, right? Fire typically is associated with anger or with passion. And she was able to transmute the anger energy into, okay, what can I do with this now? How can I allow, again, these colors, these energies to burn through my past so I can create a future for myself where anger doesn't dictate me anymore? So colors and shapes tend to carry a lot of meaning. Similarly, patterns and textures. So you want to also see if you're noticing patterns and texture. They can be either visual, they can be tactical, they can be visceral. So again, where is this insight? Where does it exist? Does it exist in the body? Does it exist in something that you see? Is it part of a bigger insight, right? But patterns and textures are another great way. Codes and languages. Some people receive, or rather, before it gets too complicated, the most simple thing of sounds, right? So sound is so powerful. And a lot of people can tend to discard sounds. And here's another example, fresh, just from yesterday. I had a client that just returned from an ayahuasca experience where, again, not much happened, okay? It was their first time. And the more that we unpacked the experience, they began remembering that they were making sounds during the ceremony and they couldn't necessarily remember it. They kind of like put it together from reports of other people in the ceremony that told them, oh, you were screaming at a certain point, you were singing at a certain point. And the more that they discussed it, suddenly like they remembered that, I do remember when I was making a sound or supposedly when I was screaming, but for me, it wasn't screaming. It was just a way for me to just say something very constant, and I was voicing something, and that sound was the only thing that made me feel better and stop the pain. And then we noticed a theme in this journey of all the different times they made sounds and utilized sounds as a way for self-soothing and also, again, to bring relief to the pain. And anyhow, again, of course, with putting these particular insights and theme with other pieces of the story that came up, it became very clear that this person was for the first time sounding or voicing very like repressed pain from a deeply traumatizing event that they experienced more than 20 years ago. So again, that's an example of how we can take what can seem very random. Oh, I just made this sound supposedly meaningless. However, here's how it was connected to something much deeper. So sounds are extremely powerful insight to look at. Also, again, in the codes and languages, patterns, like what patterns are we seeing, right? It can be secret languages. It can be what some people call light language, right? A lot of people, when they put different sounds together in ceremony, they understand that they're downloading some type of a new spiritual code, a healing technique. Basically, it's like creative new codes, new sacred geometries that can be helpful for the individual or even for their community. We know, for example, that ayahuasca, for instance, speaks through the code of music, right? And all the Icaros are very specific codes. They're light codes and technologies for healing through ayahuasca that the shamans channel through the medicine to each person. So that's an example of a code and a language. So again, I invite you to think how do codes and languages can show up or maybe have shown up in your trips? Again, sounds, visual patterns. Sometimes there's straight up mental downloads. We get like mantras, we get sentences, we get songs, we get philosophies, we get solutions for new products. I have a friend who literally through ayahuasca taught him a new code of chiseling wood. And she taught him basically like a new art technique that I guess didn't exist before. That's a type of code. Now let's talk about visions, okay? Visions and images and pictures. Sometimes we can see them as movie reels. I invite you to spend some time on those because sometimes they can be lingering, sometimes they flash. We see them as a motion picture, or are they frozen in time? Do they possess a narrative of some sort? Or are they maybe even void of meaning? By the way, a void is actually very meaningful. Sitting with the idea of a void, again, when nothing is happening. I actually suggest that this is one of the deepest insights that we can receive, as far as learning to be with nothing, quote unquote, nothing, as being part of the all, right? Because, and here's something that maybe is a little different. Our obsession with needing to receive insights, needing to heal, needing to see visions. We can see this as a type of attachment, because when we have visions and we're entertained, it literally removes us from ourselves, meaning it puts our attention on something. But what if actually that something doesn't exist and we're literally just left of existing as we are with nothing to entertain us, meaning we get a potential window into just being ourselves with no distractions. And when was the last time this happened to you? Again, just existing with zero distractions, no thoughts, no purging, no itches or scratches, no sadness, no joy, no emotion, even no hope, right? So all these things can be difficult to stomach, but like when you think about it this way, we have a constant need to have something occupy us. But what if, again, then nothing happens? What if we reframe, or rather, reframe our understanding that maybe everything is happening and we finally get to sit with it all, and we can literally tap into that all when we stop trying to escape from it through having the vision TV turned on. So basically, sitting with the nothing or sitting with the void can be an extremely powerful insight, as a way to, and again, interpret why is it so difficult for us to just, again, to sit with the all, with pure energy. More insight. So words, stories, judgments, ruminating thoughts, and narratives. Of course, none of us have those in psychedelic trips, right? So my ways to examine those would be to see, were they remaining or were they fleeting? Did they remain? If they even remained in the integration stage, can I basically, am I able to let go of them now? Or are they still remaining with me? Why are they with me, and why are, maybe why can I let go of them, or why can I not let go of them? Right? What's my obsession with them? Potential obsession with them. Characters, people, animals, plants, deities, beings of any type. As mentioned, the most powerful way to interpret these is to look at the relationship. Right? Again, what does this symbolize to me? And sure, you can absolutely rely on like symbolism books and stuff like that for interpretation of things that are more obvious. And you can get inspired by them to see like what they mean in the collective sense, right? Because again, we can look at them as collective archetypes and then see how the symbolism, how we're potentially connected with it, and what part of our personality that archetype awakens within us. Why are we embodying this particular collective archetype at this time? You can absolutely utilize that information, as well as, again, what is my relationship to the snake? To the witch, to the tiger. And speaking of, again, symbols and archetypes, yes, what about these universal motives, right? So archetypes, by the way, to those of you who maybe are less familiar with it, with the sense of the word, is basically a pattern that has been ingrained in our collective history across all of time, and that has a pretty solid and meaning for everyone, meaning a mother is a mother, right? And we all understand what a mother is. A mother has specific attributes in the eyes of the collective, right? A king or a queen, the archetype of suffering, right? We can all agree that suffering has a very specific meaning. The archetype of the inner child, nature, natural elements. So when we examine these, again, archetypes and symbols as, again, items from the collective, this can lead us into seeing these insights as collective complexes. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes archetypes that can seem very meaningful for us, and they are meaningful for us, like, for example, the archetype of the mother, right, which is so common. It's a very common archetype for people who are on healing journeys. A lot of us are healing the wounds of the mother and our relationship with a mother and our need to have the perfect mother, right? So this is something that is very common, and that is very personal and subjective to us. And because this is a collective archetype, there's also the element of the collective complex, meaning, what if my need for my mother, I'm doing my own, I'm giving an example, of course, doing my own healing work with my own mother complex. And what if at a certain point, I feel like I'm kind of like returning to this thing over and again, but basically like my idea of an ideal mother was fed from the collective. Like in the collective, there's an idea that a mother has to act and show up in a perfect way, always available for her children, always put hot food on the table. The mother and the wife and the professional, the perfect woman, right? So here we see like the cultural narratives and how we are fed by these cultural narratives. So basically, when I can see the collective complex as well, it can very much affect my own healing journey, because then I can begin to let go. I can understand that there is a collective complex going on and not everything has to do with me. And then actually I can begin to accept my mother for the perfectly imperfect human that she is. So basically understanding the collective aspect of symbols and visions and archetypes just adds another dimension to my ability to interface with these visions, and just brings about a different element, a deeper element of healing. So basically, this is the world that is beyond the self, the transpersonal world. So when I'm able to see the transpersonal world and how I am able to exist within it and have my own, again, relationships with all these, again, archetypes and visions, but I can see the bigger picture, that again, there is a lot more at play here than I may ever be aware of. It brings more perspective to this situation and affects my relationship with a thing, and it allows me to not be so attached to it. So it changes meaning, right, when I bring in the collective aspect. Another way to look at and find meaning in the experiences is understand or look at opposites, darkness and light, the feminine and masculine, small and big, yin and yang, again, richness, avoid, all these elements that, again, supposedly are just there, again, putting them together. I can understand that if I was shown opposites, okay, what part of my experience or personality is being shown this particular theme? Age groups, again, when you see yourself in a vision or just experience something, I would ask, how old were you when you experienced it? How old were you in the vision? Where does it take you when you're in the session, when you're in the journey? Was there a particular time period? So again, this is the zoom out. Where does this insight exist? Conversations and voices, dialogues. Here's something that is really important. The medicine told me. One of the most common insights, the medicine told me. I want to suggest that it can be that the medicine told you, right? And I want to suggest that it could be that it's through the non-specific amplifier that the medicine is, you heard an internal part of you being voiced. So it's a part of you voiced something deep within you, and maybe a part of you that without the medicine would not have had a chance for expression. Physical sensations, very important in ceremonies. I would always look at those. Pains, pleasures, itching, tingling, nausea. Nausea, by the way, is probably one of the most underrated ways to discover meaning of a psychedelic experience, both in and out of ceremony. Nausea can be seen as a tool to uncovering extremely deep healing. Meaning, if I feel the nausea in the ceremony, I have two options. I can either contract, and of course, this has happened to me a million times. When I'm in it, now I'm like talking like I know something, but when I'm in it, of course, in real time, it could look very different, rolling around on the mat and just holding on to dear life, right? And if I have it within myself to remember that the nausea is actually trying to tell me something. It's a somatic experience and a communication that my body is gifting me. And I can take a deep inhale to open up the body so it expands more instead of contracting. And then I can allow the nausea to lead. I can follow it and go directly into wherever it is in the gut, which is my second brain, which is presumably where the psyche is, where that repressed memory is. So if nausea is a thing for you in ceremony, then I would, again, in the integration phase, when I'm trying to make meaning, I would really ask, again, what was happening at that time when you were on your hands and knees and you felt extreme nausea? Was there a particular song that was playing? Was there someone next to you that was making sounds and annoying you and ruining your journey? Right? What was happening at the time when you were experiencing nausea? Sweating, tremoring, tears, sweat, again, temperature fluctuations, any discomforts, needing to go to the bathroom a million times. All of these is somatic experience. They're like mini capsules. Through each and every single one of these, I can sit down and analyze them, and using all the different foundations that were already shared, and then understand what wisdom they're holding. I also have a private coaching container for 8 weeks where we can prepare and integrate any of your experiences. And even if you just have like 1 or 2 insights or trips where you want more insight to understand really what it means for you, then you can contact me to set up a private appointment. And that will be it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.